Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Oraculos True Divination podcast, where I bring you ancient wisdom for the modern mystic. I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, and joining me today is the one and only Jackie Slevin. Jackie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mychal. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, for those of you, if this is your first time tuning into the True Divination podcast, this is a podcast where I bring you interviews from astrologers from around the world who you need to be hearing from. So if this is your first time here, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can be a part of the momentum and stay in the loop with these amazing astrologers. Now, Jackie, this isn't our first time connecting. We connected a few months back when I was reaching out to you to talk about your Slevin system of astrology. And we're going to be talking about that a lot here today with our listeners. But before we go into that, tell us, Jackie, who are you? How do you come into astrology? And how did you come to the place of creating your own system of chart delineation?
Okay, to begin, my name is Jackie Slevin. I'm a professional astrologer and have been one for 38 years now. I got into astrology, I was exposed to it as a young child. My mother dabbled in astrology and she had mainstream magazines that she subscribed to hanging around the house. And jokingly, on occasion, she would call me Little Leo, because that's my sun sign, Leo. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Why do you call me that? And she explained to me, because of my birthday, and that's my sun sign. I said, so what does that mean? And she would tell me the ABCs of it, but I would find these magazines lying around, and I was a voracious reader, and I would read these magazines and said, wow, this is really interesting, even though a lot of it was over my head. I was 9 or 10 years old. I didn't really understand it, but I thought it was all very interesting. And then when I went away to college, I had a roommate who, when we first got into the room together in the dorm, she put up a wall calendar. And it was an astrology wall calendar that she had received in a gift. And she only knew what the ABCs of this was. She didn't really understand it. So I said, oh, look at this calendar. I know what this is. So like, this is, the moon, the Taurus, this, I understand this. But there was one thing on the calendar that I didn't really understand so well, and that was the aspects. See, I didn't really understand that. But I kept taking the calendar down from the wall and reading every little page of this Llewellyn type calendar. I don't recall if it was a Llewellyn calendar, but it was very detailed. But I kept reading, and it kept piquing my curiosity. So then I went home for Thanksgiving break. I raided my mother's bookshelves on astrology and started reading them all, and became permanently hooked after that point.
Amazing.
So at that point, I was about 18 or 19, no, 18, when it became my hobby. And then when during my Saturn return, I was home with babies, and it just became my profession because it was something I could do from home.
Now, Jackie, I heard that you said that you discovered astrology during university, but when did your astrological education begin? Because I know that you are heavily involved in education in astrology as well. So when did your educational pursuits in astrology begin?
That's a good question. My educational pursuits in astrology began a few years after. I would have to attribute that to NCGR, because once I joined NCGR, I just became involved in education in my local chapter. I started teaching it from home. I taught it from adult schools for several years. And I taught it online for 3 or 4 years. And so I would say around the early to mid-90s, I started teaching it.
Great. And I know that you currently serve as the education director of NCGR. Can you tell us a bit about what the purpose of NCGR is, and also what your role within the fabric of NCGR is?
Sure. NCGR is an abbreviation for the National Council for Geocosmic Research. We are an organization dedicated to spreading the education and researching astrology. My role in that organization is to manage their webinar programs, in that every month we have a webinar that is free to all NCGR members. The webinar presenters are professional astrologers, and they typically present their area of expertise in a 90-minute webinar. That after it's over, it is then available on YouTube for viewing for free for NCGR members for 6 weeks and sometimes longer.
Great.
So I organize and produce and manage and present these webinars.
Great. Now, Jackie, I also know that you are currently still a practicing astrologer, and your practice of astrology spans many branches of astrology. Can you tell us some of the things that you do within your personal practice and client work with astrology?
Sure. I consult with many clients about their lives, their horoscope map, what direction to be in. I also do some horary astrology, and I specialize in vocational, which is, what should I be when I grow up? That sort of thing. I get a lot of that. And I also do a lot of timing of events with people that I can pinpoint when is the best time or not the best time to do certain things in their lives.
Varying in the direction of vocational for a bit, this has really become one of your primary pieces in terms of your astrological practice. How did that start?
I kept getting many people who were lost in terms of finding a career that they would enjoy and that they could follow. I also found that just because you have the sign on the midheaven doesn't mean that that's what you should be, even though that could be a talent. So I kind of had, it just kept pouring and pouring and pouring over thousands of horoscopes until I could crack my own code into how to codify what is the best route for someone to find their own true north and what would be the best way to access it.
Jackie, I think it's really interesting that you started by saying that you were encountering these people who were, in a sense, lost. Because for so many of us, we are, in a sense, lost. And we do feel as if we are lost in the world when we don't have an idea as to what we should be doing career-wise. And so it's amazing that in those moments when we find ourselves in that place, it oftentimes has to do with what should I be within the world? What is my purpose in the world? What am I here to do? And when you don't know what that is, you definitely do feel as if you're just roving without really a sense of direction or a center of gravity. So, I mean, if vocational astrology does that for people, then I think that it's brilliant, because my previous understanding of vocational astrology before you and I connected was that it's just, what job should I be doing? But now that you've used that word lost within it, it feels as if vocational astrology really also aligns a person more or less with their life purpose. Would you say that it serves that purpose as well?
Very much so. And if we are lost, then we want to be found. And if you're found, then you're home free, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
If you have found your true north, you'll find your way home, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the horoscope can baffle people in that we want to take that compass needle and align it to the true north. And I think that's kind of what my system specializes in.
Right.
Getting that compass needle to align to true north.
Right. Now, Jackie, I continuously hear you refer to true north, and I love what that does for me when I think about that as a vision. But I feel as if you're speaking about something very specific when you keep referring to true north. What exactly for you is true north within the context of the natal horoscope?
The midheaven. The midheaven is your true north. That's your place in the world.
Period.
Yes, that's your place in the world. The rest, well, I shouldn't say that it's all, the rest of it is all descriptive, but let's say you're in a crowd and you're you're trying to find someone and you kind of know what they look like and you say, yes, 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 there they are. Okay, that's who you are. That's your place in the world. That's the midheaven.
Yeah.
That's the midheaven. Yes. For you at that time, you see. But even though we're given a midheaven at birth, our place in the world is contingent upon many factors. First and foremost, one of the 12 signs, then the ruler of that sign, and then what is aspecting the midheaven and the sign. So it's more complicated than just the one sign on the midheaven.
And is that what you worked out within your Slevin system?
Correct. That's what I specialized in, to find the best system to access your path to true north, because not everybody gets there the same way. Not everybody, yeah. Some people have to climb over hurdles. Some people walk through mud. Some people take an elevator and they're there. You know, it's very different.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know a couple of people who took the elevator there, and
yes.
I'm quite envious.
Yeah, very envious. Yeah, and there's a way to determine that. If you see that in a horoscope, if they just press the button and they get the elevator and here they are, voila. Of course, 90% of us don't have that, but I mean, there is a way to recognize that in a chart.
Yep, I definitely have done quite a bit of wading in the mud in my life.
Most of us have. Most of us have.
So, Jackie, you are one of the rare luminaries who hasn't just come up with the system, but you've also put it in book form. And by book form, I'm referring to your book, Finding Success in the Horoscope. Now, tell our audience a little bit about your book and also what is the salient piece that they will step away from if they purchase that book and apply the methods that you guide them through.
If you purchase my book, available on Amazon and now on Kindle, and you have the accurate time of birth, and of course it's easy to determine the place you were born. If you have those factors, the birthday, the time, and the place of your birth, and a familiarity with signs, the 12 signs of the zodiac, you will be able to deduce where you're supposed to be in the world. Now, I know that's a very broad statement, but you will be able to assess your best skills as shown in your horoscope and put them out there. And whether you will be able to, say, press the elevator or take the stairs halfway and then take the elevator the rest of the way, or you're going to have an uphill climb. What to expect, what you can expect, and what you should not expect.
Amazing. And
yeah, well,
it is quite amazing. It is quite amazing, Jackie, because the field of vocational astrology is such a very specific field. And while a lot of our other approaches to astrology tends to dance around the midheaven, it's wonderful to have in book form step-by-step guidance as to how we can actually enter the landscape of the midheaven and know what to look for.
It took years to put this together. This became my raison d'etre for several years.
All right, Jackie. So today we have a chart that we are about to go into, and probably we even have time to do several charts. Who knows?
Sure.
But before we go into that, Jackie, can you tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you?
The best way to contact me is through email, jcslevin, J as in Jack, C as in cat, Slevin, S as in Sam, Lev as in Victor, IN @gmail.com. Michael, I also have a website that I have not updated for a while. It's geocosmicstudies.com.
Okay.
So they could contact me at that too. I have a couple of articles up there.
Great. So I will put both your website and your email in the description box down below so that people can reach out to you with their inquiries. Now, without further ado, we are going to dive into our charts for the day and see the Slevin system in action.
Okay, so now we have Steve Jobs here up on my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first thing we do in my Slevin system, when you look at a chart, your eyes go right to the midheaven. And so we see up on Steve Jobs' midheaven. Oh, by the way, for his data, it's February 24th, 1955, 7:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, San Francisco, California. Longitude, latitude 37 north, 46, 122 west, 25, which gives us a midheaven of 21 Gemini. So what we do when we look at a Gemini midheaven, keywords for Gemini come up: communication, networking, spreading yourself thin, making connections, right? Roads, maps, signs, information, all Gemini things.
Right.
Right. So what sign rules Gemini is Mercury. But what we're looking at right now, we got to keep our eyes fixed on that midheaven, and we see that the degree is 21 Gemini. So what we do is we throw our eyes around the chart until we find the planet that is in closest Ptolemaic aspect to the midheaven. Now, by Ptolemaic, I mean Ptolemy was an ancient Egyptian/Greek astrologer who codified the Ptolemaic aspects, which are the main aspects in astrology, the big five, okay? Conjunction, squares, oppositions, sextiles, and trines, okay? The big five. So we want to find the planet that is in closest aspect to 21 degrees of Gemini. So that leaves us, well, we have a close one. See, we have
Pluto.
Yeah, it's Pluto. It's Pluto at 25. And it's over there on the 12th house. It's tucked away back there in the 12th house. So therefore, Pluto becomes Steve Jobs' principal planet. The principal planet is the one planet that highlights your career abilities. And Pluto is an outer planet. And when your principal planet is an outer planet, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto being the outer planets, if your principal planet is one of the outer planets, you do not want a 9-to-5er. You do not want a 9-to-5 job. You can do them, but you don't like it. You don't want to be there. You want out because you hear a different drummer. Punching clocks is not your thing. You need a lot of latitude. Right. And to do something more creative than punching a clock and working for other people. People with outer planets as their principal planet do not want to take direction and work for other people all day. It's not in their mindset. So that very much describes Steve Jobs. Also, Pluto is probing and solving mysteries and getting to the core and peeling away layer after layer after layer. It's like putting something under a microscope. You know, you want to get right down to the nitty-gritty of something at the cellular level to figure out how this works, whatever it is, whether it's a sewing machine or the plot of a book or whatever the case may be. They dig and dig and dig, and Scorpios probe. You have you're kind of a Sherlock Holmes when you have Pluto as your principal planet, and you need to penetrate mysteries. It's also the occult, too. A lot of occult practitioners have Neptune or Pluto as their principal planet because they have to embrace the whole. You know, they have to penetrate mysteries and find out what makes something tick. And in this case, in this chart, we see that Pluto rules Steve Jobs' third house, which is the Gemini house of information. And how do we penetrate and codify information? So he would be obsessed with information and making connections. Mm-hmm. And with the Pluto being one's principal planet, it has a mass appeal. Other people will connect to what you're doing because what you're doing outline is on the outskirts of the mainstream. So here's someone who has to penetrate mysteries, who will not have a mainstream job and will specialize in information and how to make connections with this information. And he gave us Apple. Okay, now also in my system, when you have the ruler of the midheaven in Ptolemaic aspect to the midheaven, even if it's not the most principal planet, this person can push an elevator and get to the top. They get to the top of what they're doing. Let's say, okay, because in this instance, so you see we have his midheaven at 21 Gemini, and down in the 5th house, we have his Mercury at 14 Aquarius retrograde. And retrograde people are going to do it their way anyway. You don't tell me A, B, C, D is the alphabet. I want to start with it at E, F, G, H. You know, this is just how I want to do it. It's
right.
These people, these students often struggle in school because they don't want this rigid system. So when you have the ruler, so Mercury trines the midheaven. It's kind of wide, but it still trines the midheaven. So when the ruler of the midheaven trines the midheaven, this person gets to the top of what they're trying to achieve. They're eminently capable of taking it and running with it. Mm-hmm. And they will be noticed for it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to use the word famous, but they will become recognized for what they're doing. Fame is a loose word, you know.
The planet that aspects that midheaven by closest Ptolemaic aspect becomes, in a sense, this person's career totem, would you say?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That's called the principal planet in my system.
Principal planet.
You want the principal. You have to locate the principal planet, and then you locate where it is. Now, in this case, Pluto's in his 12th house. It's right on the cusp there. And it's why it's conjunct the part of fortune. So it suited him to work behind the scenes for a lot of years, which he did. Right? I mean, he and Steve Wozniak literally worked in a garage, you know, for a lot of years until they perfected their system.
Precisely.
Right. Yeah. And then you look at the house that the principal planet rules. Right. And in this case, it's the 3rd.
Okay. Now, Jackie, another question that I have to ask you, and sure. just because I know that we share the same background in terms of our horary education, would we take the modern rulers of the signs in terms of the Slevin system and in terms of your approach to natal, or where do you think the traditional rulers of the signs would fit into this equation?
I always use traditional, and I use both. I use traditional and modern rulers. So Mars also rules his 3rd house. And look where Mars is. Mars is in dignity in the 8th house of mysteries. It's in the Pluto house. So information is a mystery. Mystery is information.
Right.
Right? And so they have to put their information, they have to take it out of the realm of mystery and put it into the mainstream, you see. And it's also 29 degrees, which is a crisis degree. So it's on the threshold of becoming something else. It's stepping off into another dimension, and it's going to become something else. Now, also in this case, look at this chart. Mars opposes Neptune, and it squares Venus, and Venus opposes that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So we have a grand cardinal cross, which gives, that's locomotive energy.
So my next question, and just because we are also interloping our modern astrology methods as well, in terms of the aspect configurations and also the modern rulers, I want to know, would you look at the fact that there is essentially a yod aspect between the Saturn, the Venus, and the midheaven, or does that not tie into his natal career promise?
Oh, it does. Look at that. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So how would we put words around that, do you think?
That's wonderful, because in my book there's an example of someone who had a yod to their midheaven, and that example was Krista McAuliffe, the astronaut who went down in the Challenger.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was having a heavy transit to her midheaven was the day that she was notified by NASA that she was accepted into the program. There's, how shall I say, uncanny influences at work, and that, again, your work will not be in the mainstream. And it will resonate in a very unusual way with the public.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Because a yod is the finger of God,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yods are really interesting. It's when you see, like a tuning fork. See, yods are shaped like a tuning fork, and then when you tap the tuning fork, and it gives you a sound, almost like a so you could, entire orchestras are tuned with one tuning fork.
Wow.
Right? So that's you can tune an orchestra, you can tune a band, you can tune a symphony. That one spark ignites an entire different modality, right?
Wow.
And that's what he has in his chart. Yeah, that's a very good observation. Krista McAuliffe had the same thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, another question that I have in terms of this chart before we move on to another is something that I have noticed in terms of charts where people have, say, Virgo rising and Gemini on the midheaven, is that there seems to be something entrepreneurial about them in terms of them doing a career or wanting to be in a career where they are also the boss. If we take Mercury as being the ruler of the ascendant as well as ruler of the 10th, have you found that to have any bearing within your practice of vocational astrology?
We see what you're saying with Virgo rising and with Pisces rising.
Right.
Because they'll both have their personal planet, their chart ruler, and their midheaven will be the same sign. And I'm sorry, will be ruled by the same planet. Yeah, and they typically follow careers that embrace that planet, but how to do so and where to do so within that framework is a whole other thing.
Right.
But they typically they typically work within that framework.
Well, this was a very interesting first chart, and I can't wait to dig into another. So, shall we?
Okay, sure. Now look at that ascendant. Wow. So we see here with James Dean's principal planet is the moon, right? Yeah, I can't see.
Yes, he has moon at 5 Scorpio, and yes, so there's the sextile between the moon and the midheaven.
The moon and the midheaven. So the moon is the public. The moon is other people, the public at large. The moon is images, and the moon is pictures, like the moon rules photography and that sort of thing. It's also Scorpio, which is sex and sex appeal. Okay, and it rules it sextiles his midheaven. His midheaven is Capricorn, 6 Capricorn. So we're going to look at Saturn to see what Saturn is doing. Saturn's in dignity in the 10th house, okay, but it's not his principal planet. But he would, all right, so this too small. He would use appealing to the public on an emotional level, the moon, using pictures and images that would project him out in for higher visibility. He also has Venus conjunct his midheaven. So you have to put the arts in there as well. Venus is the arts and creativity. The moon rules his fourth house. I don't know how the fourth house in real estate and lineage and that sort of thing would appeal, unless he was following in the footsteps of someone in his family in show business. I don't know. Or he inherited a family trait. I don't know. But in this case, the moon also rules his fifth house, and the fifth house is show business. Now, we also see rising Mars. I mean, he's got a strong Aries rising, and he's got Uranus there. He didn't want to take direction. He wanted to do everything his way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with the moon there like that, in the seventh, partnerships and the opposite sex, sex appeal. A lot of sex appeal with the moon in Scorpio there.
And so now, Jackie, in terms of the planets that are actually in the 10th house, I've heard you speaking about planets that aspect the 10th house being very important. But now, what about the actual placement of planets in the 10th house? Where do they fall on the scale of importance?
They're very important, especially with the ruler of his midheaven in dignity in the 10th house. That's very strong. That's a strong indication of success. It also means that you have to take, I'm not saying that it'll be impossibly difficult, but you will have to take career steps step by step. There will be always a notion of moving up the ranks, providing this is his accurate time of birth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to do it step by step and move up the ranks. Mm-hmm. With that Uranus rising, well, he was a wild man. He didn't want to take direction. Mm-hmm.
So another question, Jackie, and it loosely ties into this, is regarding the prospect of financial success in terms of vocational astrology as well. Does vocational astrology also take into consideration the financial life of a person, or is it really just what will fulfill me intrinsically the most?
What will fulfill you intrinsically the most? Finances are a whole other thing.
Got it. Completely clear.
Just because you love what you do doesn't mean you're going to make money at it. However, if you love what, and then there's an idiom out there that if you love what you do, money will follow. And I know that could sound hokey, but there is a great element of truth in that, because the money finds you. I know it's weird, but especially when you have an outer planet as your principal planet. But in this, that's not the case we have here with James Dean. And if this is his accurate time of birth, he was manifesting a family trait.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it was. It could have even been a health pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been a health pattern, I would say, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he also has that Neptune trining the midheaven as well. I'm not sure if we spoke about that, but he has Neptune within
Oh, yes, he does.
midheaven, right?
Yeah, see, now, that's almost a tie with the Pluto. It's a tie within a degree.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So Neptune makes a lot of sense for him, too, because there are a lot of glamour, great deal of glamour,
Mm-hmm.
and the silver screen, and what you're seeing is not necessarily real. There is a great sense of idealization and glamour, and he became an icon.
He did.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, he became an icon. And what you were seeing was not necessarily what you were getting.
An interesting story with James Dean is that there was always speculation as to what his sexuality was. And they even honored him at one of these award shows as being an icon for the gay community. But that was nothing that he ever actually confirmed. He never came out at any point in his life and directly identified as a homosexual, but there was always that speculation, and even someone who he married before had also had a similar speculation towards him. So I'm wondering whether or not that Neptune tying in with the midheaven, which really rules also our public visibility, whether that has an impact on this overall image that we have had about James Dean, and also the enigma that he was in terms of this very private part of his life.
Absolutely. It's also the moon in Scorpio can show that as well, because Scorpio is sex. Scorpio is sex, and Neptune trining the midheaven, he was able to throw a smokescreen over it.
Yeah.
For his whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he was homosexual. He was homosexual. Was it, or he was bisexual? I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I know that, yeah, that was a big question mark over his career.
So, Jackie, shall we take a look at one more chart? This is so much fun.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, here we go. We have another moon. Moon rules his. Moon is his principal planet. The moon rules his first house. Well, which can also indicate that your physical body is involved in your career, like an athlete or a model. But that was not the case with Albert Einstein. However, the moon is your imagination, and how far you're able to, how far you can grasp, how much you can wonder and grasp and imagine things and wrap your mind around things. And his is in Sagittarius, which is even more vast. So he made his imagination his principal planet to getting out what he wanted to put out in the world. His imagination got him there. Now you'd have to have the Mercury. Look at the Mercury is conjunct Saturn. He was able to codify it. Just because you dwell on it all day doesn't mean you can put it in an equation, E equals MC squared. Right. But he used his imagination, and he's got the sun in the 10th house. So, but Jupiter and Neptune rule his midheaven, right? And Neptune is at 7 Taurus, sextiling the midheaven. So Neptune is his midheaven ruler is aspecting the midheaven, which is an indicator of it's an excellent indicator of notoriety or actually fulfilling what you're setting out to fulfill, which he did. Struggle, yes, but he definitely got to where he wanted to be. And notice that Neptune is conjunct Chiron, which is not a planet. It's he did it his way, and he did it in a sense that used specialized knowledge.
Do you think that there's a career marker here that says that this person is going to be a scientist? Would it go back to that Mercury Saturn?
No, I would say that the science is indicated in that Jupiter, the ruler, the traditional ruler of his midheaven, is in Aquarius in the 9th. That's how I would find the science. Science and imagination. You see, you can't throw the moon out. You have to keep the moon in there. I mean, there's different ways of science. Was he looking at biology, slides under a microscope? No, he was pitching himself out into the cosmos to come up with E equals MC squared. So you have to keep that moon and Sagittarius in sharp focus all the time.
Wow.
See how it works?
I think one of the interesting things with him was that he was a scientist, but he was radical even for science at the time. And he was a man way beyond his years, and his imagination and his ability to see beyond the thinking of his day is really something that caused him to stand out as a tour de force within the world.
Absolutely. His imagination is what brought him to higher visibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He wasn't studying science to use it for medicine or anything else. I mean, he used it to pitch everybody out into, he used it in ways that nobody else used it. Well, I'm not saying that nobody else did it, but he codified it. Now, for that, you need Mercury. And Mercury, in this case, is conjunct Saturn. So he actually wrote it down and published it. And Jupiter is publishing in the 9th house, and it's in Aquarius. Nobody else ever published anything like this, not really,
And I'm seeing all sorts of other things in here with his sun in the 10th house ruling the 3rd house, and the Uranus there in the 3rd house as well, of communication and also our learning, and in a lot of ways also our mind. And so this definitely looks like the chart of a genius. And granted, hindsight is 2020, but at the same time, it does seem to really flesh out our understanding of Albert Einstein as a person.
Yes, also that Uranus in the third, they're very smart, but they don't necessarily, not necessarily are brilliant students because they're not really interested in pleasing the teacher. You know, they don't they don't really care as long as they. And it's not that Einstein was a terrible student, but he it's not that he brought home straight A's or ever. No way. He was a mediocre student until you gave him freedom to do it his way.
Right.
And that's the Neptune up there. That's the co-ruler of the midheaven being Neptune, especially conjunct Chiron. They're not gonna excel with a textbook. They're gonna write their own textbook.
Well, I'd also think that would be the case with that moon in Sagittarius there in the sixth house, because traditionally the sixth house has been the house of slavery and servitude and things that are unappreciated in terms of the work that we do. And so he has that moon in Sagittarius wanting to go its own way, wanting to go places that have never been explored before, and he's going to slave at it. He's going to make that into the piece that becomes the thing. Even if it breaks his back, he's going to allow that to be his main point of emphasis and work within this world. And I think the good thing about this is that he actually thoroughly enjoyed the work that he was doing.
Yes, and he didn't do it for money. It had nothing to do with money as far as he was concerned.
Yeah.
And he was horrified that his formula was being used to formulate the hydrogen bomb. I mean, they were going to use his formula for destruction, and that put him over the edge.
Yeah.
He was extremely humane. Extremely.
Yeah. Okay, now Jackie, there is one person who has been heavily on my mind for the past few weeks, and he is Alfred Witte, and he's coming up for me now because he was also born in Germany around the same time, and he was working around the same time as Albert Einstein. And for those of you who do not know, Alfred Witte was the founder of what we now call today the Uranian system of astrology.
Okay, so he has Cancer on the midheaven, and his principal planet is the sun down there in the fifth house. So when we have the sun as the principal planet, we think of being able to take authority, leadership, creativity, and children. In this case, it's creativity, because he created an entire system. I mean, what he created is absolutely vast.
Yes.
Yeah. And he became an authority in it because it was his own, and the sun rules his 11th house. It became an entire group. It was a group specialized to him. I'm trying to think if it's Jupiter. Where's it, Jupiter? I didn't know he was a land surveyor. That's very interesting.
He was a land surveyor.
Yeah, that makes sense with that Capricorn IC and the Jupiter down there.
Right.
But his principal planet is the sun. So he devised his own system, a creative system, and developed a group out of it that put his work out there in the world. And the moon he was a very creative person. Did he have artistic talent? I don't know enough about his personal life. Well, I would say he did.
Well, the work, it's interesting because what we call the work that he did, or what we're looking for when we use the Uranian system, is indeed planetary pictures. And so it is based on this concept of symmetry, essentially. Symmetry
exactly.
Between the relationships between planets. So from the perspective of the Uranian system being essentially symmetrical astrology, it is based on this balance and this equal arc opening and this sense of things coming together to create pictures that we probably wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Right. It's an extremely visual system.
It is.
Extremely visual.
It is.
And what didn't Witte create the planetary trees?
That came out of his work. Yes.
Right, and that's extremely visual. And I've noticed over the years, astrologers who have a background in painting and arts and drawing instinctively are drawn to that system because it is so visual.
Right.
It's just an extremely visual system of astrology, and that you have to, those dots line up to make pictures. It is uncanny. Yeah. Yeah. Now I know what you're. Yes, and look at that Mars conjunct Pluto up there in the 8th. That's a cult study, and also with the Sun being the principal planet, you will stand out as a leader in your field. And he was the authority. He was he started it. He launched it. He was Papa, right? I mean, he was the leader and codified the whole system.
And what I'm finding very interesting looking here at this chart is that he has the moon, which is essentially the ruler of his midheaven, in a very tight, almost exact opposition to that Uranus.
Yes.
And so that moon ruling his career, and Uranus, I mean, he created the system that we call Uranian astrology. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
No, and it also squares Pluto, so he's got a massive T-square there. Very T-square. Yeah, T-square to Pluto in the 8th. That's the occult.
Right.
Look at that. Yeah, that is amazing. Also, I just realized that he has a mixed mutual reception with Venus and Saturn. Saturn's in Pisces, and Venus is exalted in Pisces, and Venus is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is the traditional Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius.
Right.
So the Venus and Saturn, a mutual reception, also lends credence to codifying an art form.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, that the balance and the symmetry with Venus and Saturn, the balance. Yeah, so that 13 Cancer midheaven is almost 14. That's 14 in my book, right? So yeah, but it's still that Sun is very, and becoming the leader. And I don't know if he had kids or anything like that. That I don't know. Children often are a clear connection with the Sun being the principal planet, or someone who ends up being a boss.
Well, something about him that I learned from my mentor, Gary Kristen, is that he did have children, but there was something very hidden about his life with his children. And so I don't even think his mother really knew about him and his kids, even though he and his mother were very close. He had his children, but they were kind of hidden away. And I'm not sure why that is.
Interesting. Were they illegitimate?
I'm not sure of the details.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know very much of anything about his personal life.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because kids become an issue.
It's even more interesting for me when we take his chart and pass it through the lens of the Slevin system, because I probably wouldn't have seen these connections if I wasn't knowing to go to that Sun as my main piece in terms of what's occurring with that midheaven. So I probably would have done it completely based on the moon and looking at aspects of the moon. But now using this concept of the principal planet as being the one that has the real push in terms of a person's career destiny is absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And also, look, he's got a void of course moon here. So it's not unusual to me that his mother didn't know. When someone has a void of course moon, they had an unusual relationship with their mother. Not that they didn't get along, not necessarily. It means it's not your run-of-the-mill relationship. And that could be the case that his mother didn't know about his kids.
Right. Another thing, just since we're talking about it, is that the ruler of his ascendant, i.e. him, is this Venus in Aquarius retrograde. And so while he and the mother are essentially together, it's together, but the mother is separating from him, he's separating from the mother. So I'm not sure whether or not that ties into this story about his children, but I think it's really fascinating that he did have a close connection and a close relationship to his mother, but he chose to keep this aspect of his life away from her.
Yes, and to find out what happened, it would be you would solar arc the IC to that Jupiter, and with the parental, the family dynamic. So that would be age 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, you subtract one, so you would get age 14, the family dynamics changed radically, so that would be your signal for that.
Well, Jackie, this was absolutely incredible, and I'm really happy that we got to do this today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Jackie, this was absolutely incredible to get to see the Slevin system in action over these several charts, and I definitely learned a whole lot by seeing you at work and also by seeing the system and how, when we hold on to this singular theme of looking for that planet that's aspecting that midheaven, it unfolds a really rich and nuanced way for us to interact with the midheaven. Because usually,
Right.
like I said in the presentation, my usual thing would be to go to the ruler of the 10th house as well as the planets that aspect that ruler and build up my composite image of the career that way. But this new piece of looking for the principal planet is really special, and it's something that I'm definitely going to apply right away. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to share it. And anybody can learn it. It's all right there in the book.
And tell us again where we can find your book and where we can find out more about your work, Jackie.
My book is on Amazon.com, Jackie Slevin, Finding Success in the Horoscope. It's available in paperback, also in Kindle. And my website is www.geocosmicstudies.com. And you can contact me at jcslevin, Slevin, at gmail.com.
All of that information will be down below in the description box.
Thank you.
Now, Jackie, another question that I have, since we're specifically speaking about vocational astrology, is there's been a bit of a discussion in astrology as to where the sixth house actually factors into a person's career or vocation. And I think this comes from the fact that traditionally the sixth house has always been seen as the house of servitude or slavery. And in updating our house meanings for the 21st century, we call it now a house of work or a house of job. And so I want to know for you where the sixth house fits within your framework of vocational astrology.
The sixth house factors in vocational astrology into my system and vocational astrology with medicine, a career in medicine, career in food, restaurant work. Okay, it's also the house of job skills. Just because you have a job skill doesn't mean you're going to be employed in it. You understand? Okay.
Right.
I know how to flip burgers. That doesn't mean I want to make money at it, but if I have to, I can. Right? It's not terribly fulfilling work unless it's medicine or food or being a veterinarian, which is medicine, right? I mean, if it's a sixth house thing to begin with, they typically find fulfillment in it if there's a link to it, to the midheaven. You know, if the ruler of it is on the house or vice versa, or if it's in the house. But it's not necessarily employment. And if it is employment, it's what you're doing to make money, but that's not your place in the world. For example, I'm trying to think of the jazz musician. I can't think of his name. He was a jazz musician and would always jam with other jazz musicians when they came into town, but he had a job as a postal worker. So he could support his family and not have to go live on the road, you see, and and not get into drugs and all that. Yes, he had it's often like a straight job that you just do to bring in money, but it's not necessarily terribly fulfilling. But in cases of medicine or food, it can, like a chef, something like that. It can be.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say about the sixth house representing a job skill, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone describe that in that way, because usually the distinction is made between the sixth house representing the job that you don't want to do, whereas the 10th house is the job that you do want to do. So there's been kind of this line, if you will, drawn between the sixth house being menial work and the 10th house being the work that fulfills me. But I think when we look at it from the perspective of it being a job skill, it opens up something else that makes it a little bit more useful than it just being, oh, that's the job over there that I hate doing. It shows also a potential or a toolbox, if you will, of things that we have that we can apply to other areas of our lives. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, yes. You can take it and run with it and factor it into being a principal planet or a way to find your true north if you transmute those energies into being something higher. I know that could sound hokey or esoteric, but okay, here's an example. I'm broke. Cooking doesn't bother me. Being in crazy kitchens among crazy people doesn't bother me. So I'll just go chop onions, and make all the prep for a kitchen, right? And so I'm doing my job, and I'm watching everybody, and I'm watching everything that the chef is doing, and I'm taking from the pantry, and I'm taking from the chef, and I'm learning from the dessert chef and the salad maker and that sort of thing. Now I'm going to put this in my own system and write a cookbook out of it, right? Okay, now I take that into my principal planet, and I find fulfillment with it. But I had to do. And when you see that, there'll be Saturn and Capricorn involved because there's drudgery and there's something moving up the ranks step by step. You follow me?
Right.
Yeah. So yes, you can start small. That's often with Saturn involved. You have to start small. Yeah. I mean, think of like Steve McQueen. He had an ability to work on motorcycles, and he made a career and jumping off over fences and whatever on motorcycles. But mechanics was his thing, right? Working on engines was his thing. It's dirty, horrible work, but look what he did with it, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to run with it, because it doesn't seem hokey to me at all, because I think that there's a lot of stuff in astrology that when you hear it conceptually, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. But when you actually apply it within your chart work and within your client work, it bears so much fruit. And oftentimes it surprises you because conceptually you may not get it, but the minute that you apply it to something, all of the pieces come together. So I'm going to apply it. I'll do my homework and I'll get back to you and let you know where that leads.
Very good. Also, it just came to me that if it were a sixth house thing that you had a skill, okay, I know how to cook, right? And I cook from my daily life, but you can transmute those energies into codifying it into a diet and making food therapeutic and healing, and food can heal you.
Right.
You see, so you can take it to the next level. You can take it to several levels higher. And once you're taking whatever you're doing to several levels higher above the rudimentary, it becomes your path, you see, right. And it helps you to your true north. It's kind of like St. Francis of Assisi. First do what's necessary, then do what's possible. And suddenly you're doing the impossible. You see, so you have this alchemy going on that you can transmute what you're doing into something higher. See, you thought you couldn't do something impossible when in fact you are doing it. And then when you take that into your being and your personality, it helps you on your path. So it starts in the sixth house, but it ends in the 10th, you see, because now you're taking it to a higher level.
Wow. I've never heard that path described in that way before, because it is rather developmental. It isn't just that you shoot to the top sometimes. If you are one of the many of us who have to, creep before we crawl, and then crawl before we walk, and then walk before we run, then we do have this connection between our sixth house and our 10th house, where we're taking the things that cause us to work hard and transforming them into something that is golden, and into something that is pure, and into something that really makes us feel a sense that everything that we've done before, all of the drudgery, all of the crawling through the mud, all of the trials and tribulations actually were worth it. So, I mean, it's a beautiful vision, and it also adds a beautiful sense of texture to anyone who's going through anything that is less than wonderful. You know, sometimes we have to go through things less than wonderful in order to gain the power and the ability and the passion to get to where we're going. So,
Yes, it's a purification process. It's someone who's doing menial work. It's often the refuge of a philosopher because even though your hands are engaged, your mind is free to do other things, and in so doing, you can find a way to transmute that energy.
well, I hope you write the book on that. I definitely hope you write the book on that, because I think that you are sitting on a mountain of wisdom. And even if it's not a technique book, but it's just a book on how to view these cycles of change that we go through within our lives, and the journey that that often has us on, and how that's reflected in the chart, I'd buy it. I'll be the first one.
Thank you. Wonderful.
You're very welcome, Jackie. And Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today here on the Oraculos True Divination podcast. It has truly been a pleasure having you here, and it's also truly been a pleasure learning more about your work. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Mychal. It was my pleasure. Anytime.
For all of our listeners out there, if you want to find out more information about Jackie and the wonderful work that she's doing, I'm going to put both her website and her email down below. And you are more than invited to go and check out her book on Amazon and to purchase it, Finding Success in the Horoscope, because as you've seen from the chart examples that we've done today, it works. And not only does it work, but if you're a practicing astrologer, it allows you to see this field of vocational astrology in a whole new way. And I'm so grateful to have had that opportunity with you previously when we first met, but also today again as a reconfirmation of these methods and of the system that you put together. So thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you. My pleasure. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Great. Me too. Now, now to those of you listeners out there, thank you also for joining and being a part of the momentum that we're building here at the Oraculos True Divination podcast. Your comments mean so much to me. Your likes mean so much to me. You sharing these videos means so much to me, because I believe that the world needs to hear these interviews from these luminaries within our field. So please continue to like, to comment, to subscribe, and to share this information with your astrology colleagues, and even with someone who may be feeling a little bit lost in the world. If you think that astrology can assist them in finding their true north. And I hope that what we're doing here on the True Divination podcast assists you in doing the same. So from the bottom of my heart, I love each and every one of you. Thanks for joining again, and be well. Bye.